So my background is that I studied in Delhi all along. I have done pretty much what everyone in school does. I was, busy with extracurriculars all along. I was extremely interested in studies all along, which is why I took a subject like mathematics. Um, in 11th and 12th, I ended up taking physics, chemistry, maths with economics, actually, not interested in economics at all at that point. And further not because my teacher was accidentally my bua, which is my aunt. So I was really, really not liking my 11th, 12th economics at all. But I really enjoyed doing physics and mathematics, more physics than math at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so 12th board happened and the exams went really well. So obviously I could have taken either of those two subjects that I enjoyed. At that point, actually, I was interested in doing something more artsy at that point. But somehow conversations happened with people who were older to me and who were into uh, a career that had already taken them somewhere. And it seemed like math was a safer option in that sense. So yeah, so then math happened, and I ended up studying my bachelor's in Miranda House, Delhi University. Those 3 years were really, really great. The math in college is entirely different from the math in school, which was a big learning. Um, and more about that later, perhaps. But yeah, so Miranda happened 3 years, and then after that, actually, I thought I will become a full-time actor for a point. So I, yeah, so I went around doing some amateur, semi-professional theater in Delhi for 6, 7 months
Mm-hmm.
before I started feeling bored, and I decided that I want to do more math.
Right.
And then I ended up preparing for IIT JAM, which is your exam that you take for a master's in mathematics at one of the IITs,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up scoring a decent score and being at IIT Madras for 2 years. And yeah, so that's the background.
Wow, that's amazing. All right. So, what did you enjoy the most when you were pursuing your degree at IIT Madras?
Um, so I think my favorite thing about my time at IIT Madras was the fact that everyone was studying something interesting, and most of them were very, very interested in what they were doing. So what that means is at the recess or when you're going to eat lunch at the mess, there are so many people who are so intelligent, uh, so enthusiastic, and talking about such interesting things. I think
Right.
that kind of an atmosphere really is fascinating. And lately, after I finished college, I realized it's very, very rare. To have so many people who are interested and who are talking about such amazing things, right? Like one day at lunch, you're talking about aerospace. The other day, I'm talking about, say, the Heisenberg theorem, something or the other, and it's quite fascinating. So I think that was my favorite thing about IIT Madras. And of course, the place is beautiful. So that didn't, deter anything.
Absolutely. All right. So we have someone like you who can say, explain to us, why mathematics attracted you, and accordingly we can take a decision. But at that time, like, how exactly did you decide that mathematics is the right choice?
So honestly, I don't think one can tell what is the right choice for them. I mean, people are sometimes really, really sure about what they want to do, but most people aren't. And I think that's completely fine. You need not know that you want to study this and then that and get to that job.
Right.
Um, Mathematics is something I always enjoyed and I was fairly good at. So it wasn't like I started doing carpentry out of nowhere, right? So I knew I was building my basics. So I think it was that. Like I was fairly good at it. It was an interesting thing. It had great prospects. And also really at a bachelor's level, it perhaps didn't matter that much what I was studying.
Mhm.
Because I could really have ended up doing anything, which people did after masters as well.
Right.
So yeah, so don't stress so much is the thing. Like the choice will make itself.
Right. All right. So how did you decide that after doing mathematics, you wanted to pursue a career in economics? I mean, yes, they are quite closely related, but how did that?
Right.
How did you get into economics?
Um, so actually, I was not going to be sitting for placements that year. I had stayed back to that like semester, that period because of the theater performance, and the
Right.
placements were happening, and I was basically FOMOing over it, and I just decided to sit over the Royal Bank of Scotland's placements exams and tests. I had previously at Miranda House done a lot of internships,
Okay.
lot spanning a lot of things. Like I'd worked with startups in real estate, I'd worked with startups in the edtech space, I'd worked with Aditya Birla Life Insurance,
Wow.
Reliance Life Insurance, Wealth Management. and some economic finance things as well. Um, because I had that breadth of experience, I managed to ace one of the tests that the NatWest Group or the Royal Bank of Scotland took it as a part of the uh, selection process. Um, at that point, they were also not selecting specifically for economics, for modeling, or for any of those things. They were just selecting IIT kids because they hoped that everyone will be able to figure out what to do at work. Um, it so happened that I ended up in the economics team. I obviously could have chosen to left, leave it, or move into the modeling team, which is more hardcore quants. But I really enjoyed it. One of my major things with the kind of math that we ended up doing in college was that it was so far removed from what our lives were,
Mm.
right? While it's fascinating, the abstract algebra that you get to study, the manifolds, the calculus on that is just very, very intellectually stimulating, but just feels very, very siloed. Um, Economics, on the other hand, is not that, right? So at this moment, sitting here, I know how coronavirus is impacting pretty much everyone in the world in terms of their jobs, in terms of their prospects. And I think that's a really, really interesting space to be in. So while the decision wasn't made with a lot of thought, the decision to stay is certainly there. Yeah.
That's nice. All right. So my next question to you is, as I mentioned in your introduction that you do these things, so can you just elaborate or explain what macroeconomic forecasting is and what scenario generation is?
Sure. Um, okay. So forecasting in general, I think we're all aware of it, right? You open the newspaper, you have something like the weather forecast, you have sun signs, or whoever believes in that, that's there. The idea of economic forecasting is pretty much the same, right? You want to be predicting the future. Um, what future? The economic future, obviously. So you want to see how your labor market is looking like, how many people will have jobs in which sector, how many people will be, say, how much money people will be making, and in return, how much they will be spending. So all of that, essentially, the entire picture of how your world is going to look like. And not just in terms of pure economic incidents, but also in terms of political incidents, right? So if there is a war tomorrow, what happens? If there's a trade tension like the US-China trade war happens, then what happens?
Right.
Uh, Climate change, all of that, right? The idea is to forecast that. You do that using mathematical tools, statistical tools. You do that by kind of brainstorming about what are the brewing risks in the economy. So a lot of qualitative research built on quantitative assessments.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's how you end up saying that this may happen. Most of that time we are wrong, but it helps get a range of things. So
Yeah.
that's really, really important. The other part of my work is so that's also scenario generation, right? You think about how things are going to pan out. Even like long term, if people are going to continue to work from home, for instance, then what happens to say big, like all the big buildings and offices? What happens to them? People just stop coming, right?
Yeah.
So that's one part of my work. The second part of my work is economics briefing and presentation. So I go and meet a lot of people. I talk to them about what's happening, all the things that I'm telling you right now, I tell them. Yeah, so that's what I do.
All right, that's quite interesting because I think even when we spoke on call, I told you that we've had nothing of this sort before, like even nothing close to this kind of a field before. So this is really new to the people that watch our sessions, and it's really interesting as well. All right, so how do you think STEM as a whole will progress in the future years?
Like it always has, it's the backbone of a lot of things. Also, STEM, it's so the STEM that you're doing right now is going to be relevant and very, very important 100, 500 years in the
Right.
future, right? The things we do seem obscure right now. So in that sense, it's always going to progress to become better, and the world is becoming more and more technologically advanced. The fact that we're having this conversation is not something that people thought of like 10 years back, right? I remember in school, I was just playing games on a CD-ROM, and yeah, so that was my lifetime. Things are progressing really, really fast, and I think we can't tell until span is fast. STEM is at the bottom of it, like anything else, like always. Uh, I know this is a session specifically for STEM, but I also want to add that arts and all of those things are also equally important at this point. Given the way the world is progressing, I think the humaneness of our kind of stems from art, and that kind of needs to balance out. But it's really, really fascinating where the world is going, and STEM is at the basis of it.
Absolutely. In fact, I mean, STEM is a whole big community, but there's also STEAM, which is like arts integrated within this full form that there is. So there is
Sorry.
equal importance that should be given to STEAM as well. Absolutely agree.
Mhm.
All right. So, what do you think is the future of economic forecasting here in India? When do you think it will get the attention that it rightly deserves? And what would be some means through which we can accomplish that?
Um, so I think economic forecasting in India is an interesting way to look at it, right? When you say, are people doing it, like, are they forecasting stuff that India will go through? Perhaps not as much on the surface level, and that's primarily because the data seen in India is really, really bad. So my focus is on the UK, and you get every day you get some kind of a high frequency indicator to tell how the economy is doing, but India just doesn't have that, and that is primarily because we are extremely big. And so that while that's a horrible thing in terms of trying to understand what's going in the country actually, it's also a great opportunity on what is yet to come. I think there are a lot of interesting startups that are doing that already. There's this thing called How India Lives. They do this data visualization thing, very, very good. Not as startups, they're ground covers. Fintechs are really, really great in the terms that they're going into these tier two, tier three spaces and trying to understand what that sector needs, right? The financial lending in that spaces, the possibilities are truly endless when it comes to India, and I think we're progressing in the right direction. The only massive thing that can really go back is the fact that there's a political. So economics is not siloed, like as I was mentioning. The political aspect of it is really, really heavy, and unless and until there is a government support, it kind of falls apart. Um, but definitely, India has a lot of prospects. As long as our country doesn't get into war or anything, we should be good.
Yes, agreed. Absolutely. All right. So, what are some rather important objectives that India is set to accomplish? I know this is getting a little too India centered, whereas you work mainly in the UK, but what are some rather important objectives that India is set to accomplish in the field of economics?
So I am not a good person to answer that because I haven't trained in economics. Um, my answer to that would be that the fact, so I've been, thankfully, to answer this question, I have been reading some bits about the Indian macroeconomics and just in the field of economics as well. So the Niti Aayog thing that was set up for financial planning, they have started to look at some obscure, so relatively obscure things such as behavioral economics in their main guide, which is really, really big. There are a lot of accomplished economists in the country, and I'm sure they're doing great work. I just don't know. One of the things is that I am aware of is the fact that a lot more people are looking at stuff like gender and economics, so they are very, very intertwined in terms of pay gap and all of that. But the work has usually been UK or Western centric because they are the people who've been working on these things. India's focus data, again, is unavailable. So that kind of exploration is happening more and more now. So I think that's something to look forward to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so how do you think your degree in mathematics has helped you in what you're currently doing? And would you recommend it to young folks that want to pursue a career in the economics field?
Okay, so two questions, right? I think a degree in economics, both bachelor's, master's, whatever, in mathematics, sorry, is a way to think about the world more than the actual functional formula. Right? I can learn the formula, but the way you arrive at it. So I remember my first day at IIT Madras, and our professor had walked in and asked us, a bunch of people who had scored really well in the All India entrances and had obviously studied math for so long in their bachelor's, asked a very, very simple question: define the number one. And none of us just knew how to react. We were like, what are you saying? One is one. Like, we don't know what to say. But the idea is, how does it come about? And the fact that you can think of anything, you can logically construe very, very complex statements and understand something that is otherwise inexplicable is very, very fascinating. And that's what math gives you, the ability to create algorithms in your head,
Right.
no matter what the thing is. And I think my main learning, while I obviously enjoyed the plethora of subjects that we got to learn, cryptography, abstract, whatever, but my main learning was the way one thinks about things was really, really fascinating for me. I think that's my main takeaway. In economics, how does it have? So, corporate world is a very, very fascinating space to be. You can come here and do something really basic for all your life, and you'll get paid enough. Or you can come here and challenge yourself and challenge other people and really grow. It allows for both, which I think is great. Um, and there's some really interesting people here who have PhD in rocket science, PhD in molecular biology, everything, and everyone is in finance for some reason. So it's quite fun in that sense that they're building these spaces, the ways of thinking, and building these organizations. For people who want to study economics, which was your second question, I think that's the way to go about it. A lot of economics that people do is econometrics in the corporate space, and even apparently in academia these days, that math centricness is really really heavy. But I think at no point one should think that having math is enough to know economics, because there's a lot of theory. But both those things are hand in hand. So you could actually study math and do physics, biology, economics, any of that. Do it. My my suggestion would be that.
All right, that's great. Okay. So, over the course of your career as an economics analyst, have you ever worked on or seen projects that, I mean, in your field that you have not agreed to or you have not agreed with as an individual?
Um, so not wholesome projects per se. Thankfully, I feel like that would be a really tricky space to be in.
Exactly.
Um, but I have experienced parts of projects that I don't agree with. Like especially someone who has done a degree in STEM would not agree with, because we're used to a certain level of rigor, a certain of level of sanity in the way we do things.
Right.
But workspace is often very very different. The true reality is that unlike a mathematician, a person who is working in a corporate space does not have uh, so much time. They only have. So I worked on creating scenarios which are usually like a month's process in 2 days. And obviously the rigor goes out the window in that case.
Right.
Um, so there have been spaces where we have done things which I wouldn't agree with,
Uh-huh.
but that's a trade-off between practicality and the ideal state of things that STEM wants to happen. Yeah.
Right. All right, fine. So this will be my last question, after which we'll be entertaining questions from our audience members. So all of you guys can start typing out questions in the chat box. So my last question to you is there any final piece of advice you would like to give to us budding boys and girls in STEM?
Do it because you like it. Don't do it because you're forced or because you want to do something else. I think one thing that we forget, or perhaps never realize for some people, is that we are living our lives. Your 11th grade is your life, 12th grade is your life, and wherever you are, this is a life that you're living. Make sure that you're leading towards creating a life you want, not a career, or not like this degree. It live through it. It's really, really interesting and it's worth exploring. So enjoy this process is my advice.
All right, fine. That was great. So while we wait for people to type in their questions in the chat box, we also like had a proper Google form on which they signed up for this. So okay, we
Yeah.
already okay. All right. A lot of people believe, RM has asked, a lot of people believe that an MBA degree or a degree in economics is losing its importance today. Do you agree and
hmm
would you suggest pursuing these in years to come?
Um, so MBA is a tricky one, right? MBA is a lot of investment in terms of financial, whatever investment. But
Right,
the trade-off you get is again crazy, right? But it depends on where you do it from, what you do, and all of that. I don't think things lose their importance because of some people on LinkedIn or social media saying that it's losing its importance. Uh, Till now, we know that in terms of job openings, people would hire a Harvard MBA over someone who doesn't have a Harvard MBA.
right,
In India, IIM MBA over who doesn't have an IIM MBA. Economics too. You can see it right from undergrad job postings that people do pay more for economics guys, and that's because of the kind of training you're getting. Nowhere am I saying that this is absolutely necessary for you to do well in life,
right,
but there's a, it's like you have a certain process structure in place and you can follow that or not. But the point is, if you follow it, doesn't mean you will fail, right? You have to obviously work harder. Doing an MBA 50 years back was just all that you needed to do. This time you need to do an MBA, then a CFA, then an FRM. You have to do a bunch of other things. It's more competitive, but it's definitely not lost its steam.
Absolutely. And another thing is there's no set formula just because it worked out for someone or just because, it,
Yeah.
or like even you said, just because social media tells you, it doesn't mean it's true. If something worked out for someone, something else could work out for you. So absolutely
Yeah.
right. Okay. So Aishwarya has asked, after pursuing BA Eco, should I pursue a job immediately after my undergraduation or should I apply for a master's and then a job?
I think it's important to understand what you want to do. So if you want to do, well, if you want to end up working only, I think it would be interesting to work for a couple of years and then do a master's, just because it tells you what kind of job you'll be getting into. Of course, the job type also changes drastically from after bachelor's to after a master's. But just to kind of get an idea, I would definitely say wet your feet before you jump into it.
Right, makes sense. All right. So Ishika has said that she'll be a commerce graduate this year, and she does know that this is all about math and how it helps in economics, which it isn't. It's just about STEM, but it's all right. I'll be a commerce graduate this year, and I have a lot of interest in economics. Do you think without having a master's in mathematics, there is a career graph in economics?
Surely, yeah. I think so. I'm not really sure what commerce grads study, but I definitely think that there is space to maneuver. You will have to convince people that they should take you. Some of the skills that you need to be good at are skills with data, skills with algorithms, skills with just thinking about how the world works. Presentation, communication, all of that becomes really, really important. As soon as you can convince someone that you have those, I think the job should be yours.
Absolutely. Okay, so Rishad Bora has asked, should we invest in cryptocurrency? Will crypto have negative impacts on the economy?
So I can't give investment tips to children. I am afraid. But crypto is perhaps going to be the future. It's definitely one of the more exciting things. Negative effects, most likely, like most new things do. People have already lost a lot of money, so I think there is that. But one of my colleagues made 11 lakhs after investing just like what 10 or 50,000,
Wow.
and so yeah, so it worked out for him. But yeah, not going to answer that question. Sorry.
All right. So Amika has asked, how did you realize that the slight detour from math to acting was not what you wanted? Were you driven to math again? Is Miranda House difficult to get into? There are three questions.
Um, right. So I haven't left math. I left acting. Sorry, I continue to act, uh, which is great. So the thing, what I realized was that I could do math and act, but if I just did acting, then perhaps I would not be able to do math.
Yeah.
So my idea was to understand what I want in life
Mhm.
and see, what I don't lose if I choose that, right? If I'd gotten into acting at whatever age of 20, 21, then perhaps I would not be aware of what math could do, which would have been great. I would perhaps be a Bollywood star, but I guess you get some in your life and lose some. So yeah, the second question is, were you driven to math again? Yes. I think the kind of conversations that we had in Miranda itself was so interesting, and I think I missed that. I was driven back to it. I think it's happening to me again. I would like to do a PhD at this point. Um, but yeah, I mean, who knows when? Is Miranda House difficult to get into? Um, yes, I think. So the thing is, it's very competitive, right? It always has been. You need to get what 99%, 98% to get in. Um, so it's just Delhi University North Campus in general that's become difficult. But I think if you just study hard, hopefully get in. But there are these things called ECAs, which is quota systems for sports, for theater. So do that, and then you can get that thing working for you as well. Yeah, not really easy.
All right, fair enough. Okay. So Aishwarya has asked, what are job prospects in economics? Do I have to do some kind of specialization during my undergraduate or master's in order to get a job?
So I don't think in bachelor's you can do a specialization. But the kinds of jobs that you can get range from stuff like that I do, of course. Then there's stuff that you could be a research assistant with anyone who is doing an economics research project. It could be with a V school. It could be with more hardcore economic spaces like the Berkeley Institute, JNU, any of those places. IITs now. Economics, you could also try for the IES, which is the Indian Economic Services, Civil Services, which is great. Then there is stuff like, of course, corporate internships are there. So that could be stuff like data analytics, economics research. You could work with the economists. You could get into writing. You could work with fintechs. They usually take econ grads. Yeah, lot of opportunities.
Absolutely. Okay, so she has also asked what kind of math is usually taught in economics. And I mean, if you could just throw a little bit light on the kind of topics, but also Sukanya does not have an economics background. She has
Yeah.
done math, so just like mentioning that. And she's also asked the difference between BA Eco and BSc Eco, and is the math different in these two honors? Again, she's not studied economics. And how much math should I know? Can you specify? If you could just like
So
sum it, yeah.
yeah, so I know some economists who don't know math at all. So I think you don't need to if you don't want to. Math helps you do the quantitative bits, right? You can say that this is going to happen, but how do you justify it, right? So math is the basis with which you work with that. So what kind of math? I don't know what the courses teach you honestly, but I think statistics heavily important, algebra, um, at some point calculus. I think these are the three things that I have used till now. Also coding, learn coding. If you want to do anything, learn coding. Very, very important.
Right. Any specific languages that we should be looking into?
So things change quite fast, honestly. But R and Stata are things that people use as economists, but people are more and more using Python, and I think that's going to be obsolete too. With coding, how I have found it is the fact that you should just learn how to get with algorithms. Everything you can Google, honestly, but learn how to create algorithms in your head, and you should be fine.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So she's also asked how many internships should we like do, or how many internships should we be doing during our undergraduate course, and will projects and internships make a difference? Like you mentioned, you've done a lot of internships and most of them were extremely impressive. We could just talk about that as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think you do as many as you can. Don't kill yourself over it. Enjoy doing the other things also, right? So internships, apart from internship stuff that's happening in college is also really, really important. If you hold a position of responsibility. So at my time, I was general secretary of the math department. I was treasurer of some departments in the university, production head, blah blah blah. So do those things. Show that you can do things, right? Internships are what was the question? When? How many? How many? I don't know. Really, don't do too many because that will fill your seat. It definitely makes a difference in your CV because everyone has studied, right? Now the point is what is the add-on? And at this point, I feel like everyone has done internships also. So do internships if that results in something actionable, right? Make a difference essentially.
Yes, yes, agreed. Okay, so Mansirat has asked, how can we get to know about internships that might enhance our knowledge regarding economics? And she's a high school student.
Hmm.
Any basic things that we can look into to get some knowledge about economics?
Sure. I think what you could do is basically, if you are interested in economics, start reading about it. Uh, when you start reading, you see that you start to understand what names come up too often, right? So say you're reading The Economist again and again, so you know that this is a big one. So you can actually just write to them and ask if they have an internship to offer. And if someone from high school writes to them saying that they are willing to do whatever, some kind of writing or data work, I think there is a good chance that you might get it. Newspapers do that. Newspapers write economic articles, and they really like younger people to write and contribute. So definitely go ahead, ask people. Don't be afraid. I think that's the big one. Don't be afraid.
Absolutely, I agree with that. In fact, I have a few friends that want to pursue economics ahead. So they, like you said, emailing professors or just emailing people in general, asking them for opportunities, it usually works out. So you should go for it.
Yeah, people are nice. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So Rishit has asked, Rishit has asked something regarding climate change. So how do we face climate change via economical policies? Does taxing rich people heavily work in facing climate change? Is controlling the funds and working of corporations by the government a way to face climate change? Is it worth investing in nuclear energy over renewable energy? So they're like almost four questions. Yeah.
Okay. So climate change essentially has kind of uh, it's not because you and I are using plastic as much as it is because of certain organizations doing certain things that they shouldn't have done. Uh, if not for only looking at profit, right? The idea is to bring in the fact. So economics works in the most basic sense in terms of incentives, right? Incentives are hindrances. If you incentivize companies to do something else, which could be something like a tax break or taxing someone in the coal industry, that kind of automatically pushes people away from that space. Or you could just say that you won't lend to such spaces, right? So, for example, NatWest Group has said that they will reduce lending to anyone who has a carbon footprint over certain numbers, right? So, those things are the way you can move spaces. India has a specific problem in the sense that we are heavily coal dependent. And for us, it's different than the rest of the world because we are a newly coal dependent country. Like coal plants live for what 60, 70 years. Ours are not that old. So there is that kind of a dichotomy in terms of, and we just don't have the money to kind of do those things. But still, we have traditional practices that would help, and if the government could incentivize those things, that would be definitely useful. In terms of taxing rich people, I think different people have different views. I think it definitely works. In facing climate change is I don't know what that means. Does that mean if you can use their money to do certain things? Definitely. I think it also kind of, if you can redistribute wealth, you enable uh, your motivations of doing things kind of change. And I think that is useful. Um, it's controlling funds and working of corporations by the government away. So that's the thing, right? You don't want to invite another evil when you're facing one, right? Government control over free markets is perhaps not the best way to deal with things, which is what we have seen in history primarily. Uh, you have to kind of ensure that there's a positive incentive for people to do things. Is it worth investing in nuclear energy over renewable energy? Um, Renewable energy, I think nuclear energy also has that entire war angle to it, right? So perhaps not the best person to answer, but no, is my answer.
All right. So, my next question to you is, okay, some Meher has asked, how exactly do we decide for what kind of a job will we be best suited?
Mm, Try it out.
Yeah,
That's how you decide. Of course, you get the job description, right? Whenever you apply, you know what they largely expect. Go when you're interviewing, and interview for things anyway because you'll get to experience that. When you're interviewing, ask them what their day is like. I think that's really important because if you are expecting to do fascinating things every day, that might not happen. So ask them what a boring day is like. Ask them what a hectic day is like, and kind of assess through that. A very, very useful trick, in my opinion. But what suits you is decided by you. So understand again what kind of life you want. Some people want to work sunsets, so they can't work hours that I do, for example, right? Sometimes I return home at 1 or 2 a.m. And obviously, I don't have time for anything in the evening. So that kind of trade-off you need to understand for yourself.
right. Exactly. Okay, RM and Meher both have asked, when do you think is the right age or right time to think about internships?
If you're asking this question, then you're thinking about it. I think if you have the time, then go ahead and do it. I don't think there is any such thing. One thing to note is that if this is from a CV perspective as well, you can't really put in everything, right? We possibly can't. So just try to see what you want to be doing going towards, and do those things as opposed to everything. Unless you don't know, in which case it's useful to try it on. But I think even people won't hire you if you're in the fifth grade, right? So make that judgment. If you know people who will hire you for anything, that would be great. Yeah, really no fixed answer again. But there is no pressure to do it, honestly. Do it because you want to, not because of anything else.
Absolutely. And in fact, I mean, something coming from personal experiences and people that I see around me. I'm in the 12th grade right now. So a lot of my friends or a lot of people that I know are planning to apply to, universities abroad, and they look at your application quite holistically. So I have noticed that so many people start things or, they do things just to put it on their application, just to put it on their CV. So I'm just saying, don't do
I
so.
think,
Yeah,
yeah, I think also that, when you're putting up a show, sometimes people can tell unless you're amazing at it, right? So for example, it need not be an internship, but if you're a dancer, that counts for something. The fact that you put in so many hours, disciplined hours, learning something, performing something, that's great. So find what you like and then do more of that. Get to the best of what that could lead to.
absolutely. And in fact, at one point, you'll have to either stop doing it or it'll show because people aren't dumb, right? As you said, it'll not show unless you're like a very good, performer, or you're being able to conceal it.
Yeah,
Otherwise, people do get to know, and then it just shows. So, I mean, I don't get the
yeah.
doing something to get to a place. Do it because you like it. Don't do it because I want to go here. All right. So another question that so yeah, I was saying at the very beginning that we had a Google form to which people signed up, and when they signed up, there was like a thing where they could ask questions. So I also have a few questions from there. So someone had asked, how exactly do you think the Brexit, like the entire thing of Britain exiting the EU, has impacted the economy of Britain?
Um, so what has happened with Brexit is really interesting, right? So when I had actually joined, we were thinking about a hard Brexit, a no deal Brexit, and we're still thinking about it, but things haven't really moved. It's been a lot of uncertainty. What uncertainty means for business is basically not a good place to invest, right? People don't know how the laws will change, if they should become expansionary. Like a great space is something like a non-coronavirus period and a coronavirus period. You just don't know how to react right now, and so Brexit also has led to that. But people have also been so now they're used to it, right? So now they're like, okay, we'll do whatever we want to. But there's obviously stuff around specific things like fisheries. So those industries are even more affected. Uh, Whatever the different points of contention are, so those kind of get muddled significantly. Then there's this entire point of the fact that UK has a lot of EU nationals and EU has a lot of UK nationals. What happens to their lives? So of course, the moment you talk about the fact that these people may not even have the possible free movement, and you kind of where do they go and what happens to where they are earning money, where they are spending money. So a lot of economic turmoil in that sense. I think uncertainty is the biggest one because it's been so prolonged. And even at this point, we don't know because the last negotiation date was supposed to be 31st or whatever, January initially, and then they entered into a transition period, and they still don't have a deal because that ends on the 31st of December. So a lot of, again, people just don't know of what to do. A lot of volatility in the market, and coronavirus has made things worse for the UK.
Absolutely. All right. So, as you just said, coronavirus has made things worse. Someone in that question thing had asked, what are the present economic scenarios after the COVID breakdown?
Is that in respect to the UK, or
Yeah,
are we talking about it?
back to the UK or say
Okay.
worldwide, you want to throw back.
Right. So largely, if you think about coronavirus, right, a couple of things can happen. Everyone gets okay by the year end, which would be great. You have a vaccine, everything's okay, people return to normal, everyone forgets about all of this thing. Of course, there will slide. You could really, so in economics, we call it a V-shaped recovery. So you kind of go down, then you go back up, and everything's fine. And historically, you've seen that, right? You've seen that in the H1N1 flu, people went down, like economy went down, and it did even better because people were renewed with energy and wanted to do more. Or what could happen is that there's a permanent scarring in the economy, that things don't really recover. An example of that would be the Ebola crisis that happened in Africa. The tourism industry there was hit for 5 years after the Ebola thing happened. Even after 5 years, they were only able to recover 50%, which is crazy, right? Because that's a lot of money wasted. Um, yeah, so that could happen, that there's a permanent scarring of the way things happen. Jobs are relocated, primarily because you would see stuff like the tourism industry never really recovering as much. So what do they think? People who have that skill tech do. Another thing is technology, which we were talking about a while back, that now people are investing more into technology because they know that, such a situation can happen, and maybe they don't even need people that much. So they move that, so you lose more jobs and da da da. Then there's the entire idea in the UK about government support. So India hasn't had that much, honestly, but UK has been extremely generous with the way they have supported their people. They have job retention schemes, job support schemes, business loans. India's also had that, but theirs is more generous, so to say. So that, what does that do to the economy, and how long does that stay in terms of inflation? That's sorry, too much conversation. But basically, these are a couple of angles that we look at things with: sectoral breakdowns, regional breakdown, all of that kind of comes together.
Right. All right.
Mhm.
So, another thing is that another question that was asked is what impact will India's economy have? I mean, in terms of, okay, no, what impact will the Indian economy's progress and the ups and downs, what impact will it have on UK's economy or on like whole Europe?
Uh, so India is an interesting one, right? Because you were thinking that India and China, for example, are the two global south economies that are doing really well. When India came into origin, no one really thought India was going to do well at all because of the diversity that we have, or the simple fact that we're a democracy. Um, but we did well, and it shows to the world that there is a possibility that this is the kind of life that you could lead. So in that way, India's ups and downs are important to the world economy. Also because it's a part of the supply chain, right? India produces a lot of stuff for the world, and I mean, I used to think it like this. Maybe I'm stupid, but I thought that this part comes like this car is made in India, but that's not what happens, right? This part of the car is made in India. This part of that is made in there, and everything comes together, and something is made. So India is important in that sense. I think I was reading somewhere the other day, not sure about the exact numbers, but even in terms of the drug that's going to come out, vaccine, India has a lot of capacity to produce something like that. So that's very, very important. So India's economic progress is important to the world because India is a massive chunk of that. China is even more so. So yeah, what was the second part of the question? Europe specifically, right? I'm not really sure about India-Europe trade relations, but I definitely think there's a lot of balances that India and Europe has. UK specifically, again, new trade deals will be made, so India if they are able to do that, also benefits from that. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so another question that was asked is there any formula? Hmm? Yeah, okay. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so is there any formula that would help us know the impact of any new diseases? I mean, is there a formula that we could understand the impact of diseases on economy?
So formula is a fairly simple thing. It would be great if there were, but there isn't. But people have done a lot of study on health economics, epidemiology, and all of that. New diseases are hard to understand, right? What kind of new diseases? So even something like a seasonal flu, when it first hit, people were really, really afraid about what to do. But when it became like when people know what to do, then it becomes easier. Right? With coronavirus, if it comes again, like it does is like it is in a lot of countries, they know what to do. So the second wave is relatively less harmful for the economy. Not really a direct formula because you don't know what shape it will take. If it was just an epidemic, maybe this wouldn't have been so bad.
Absolutely. And another thing is that you need to understand, like you said, you know what to do. But with the COVID-19 like virus, people don't exactly know what to do because there's still research going on and there's still new things that come up that it might be this or this might be ineffective. Something that was effective for so long is now termed ineffective. So there are lots of things that are getting updated in this entire scenario, which is
Yeah,
there is no set formula that can be to figure out the
surely. Yeah, and I think one more thing there is not just the fact that the virus in itself is unpredictable, it's also us as humans, right? We don't know how we are going to react as a general public. Some people might say that masks are irrelevant and you can go out and live your life as they want to. And that keeps the economy up, but you lose lives. So there's that also happening. So a lot of uncertain factors in there.
Absolutely. The human response to, things like diseases in general, and different disease will have a different.
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense. Okay. So another question asked was, has being a woman or has being a girl ever affected your trajectory in like your career, in what you've done until now?
Yeah, I think so. So it's an inevitable part of what happens. For some people, it happens very obviously. For some, more what do you say, subtle way. I think I remember two, three things that have happened that have changed the course of things that I wanted to do. I think early on, even in school, I was good at math, and I remember some of the boys in the school had come up with this math club, which I don't know what it was called, but whatever it's called something. And it was all boys. And I remember I'd asked, they were my best friends, and I'd asked them if I can join it, and they were just like, no, it's not for, girls. And I was like, that's just really weird. So anyway, so I was like, I don't want to be a part of it either. But I like those people went to competitions and all of those things, right? You automatically get excluded from something like that. Um, but I ended up doing math in Miranda House, which was very, very liberating and empowering. Uh, women can support each other in ways that other people can't because they know the struggles that you have. And a lot of things that I faced till then, I didn't realize that I was facing them until someone said this is a systemic, structural thing and it's not something that's happening because you did something. So that was great. Miranda was a turning point in the fact that I was a person who is also identifying as a woman. Um, the another thing that kind of shifted my space away from academia was a general sexual harassment incident in IIT Madras. So, I mean, the way it would have probably been dealt in a corporate space versus an academic space is really different because of the sternness that is in the space. I felt really uncomfortable with the fact that people could go on without realizing that. So yeah, so I kind of shifted away from an Indian academic space because of that majorly.
Right.
So yeah, I think it does, and even right now, NatWest is a great space to be in for a woman. We are the first major bank to have both the CEO and CFO as women, and that's really great because it really pushes your morale up.
Absolutely.
And I see that. So I see that affecting me in a very very positive way. So yeah, I think it's a thing that happens.
That's nice, and absolutely it makes that's the entire point of STEM for girls, so as to say, because it's to find women who you can have as role models, and then you can look up to them and feel empowered and believe in yourself, and still have that feeling that yes, I can do this, or yes, I can come to that level. So absolutely
Surely.
right. Also, so another question that was asked is that how different is how you were, so you already mentioned there was like this was say major reason why you shifted to the UK, but how different was is the atmosphere in India when you were learning and now when you're working in the UK, and you also worked as an intern in many organizations as you mentioned, so how different is the work ethic, and how, yeah, how diverse is it?
Um, so I think it depends again where you are. Working with the London space is interesting because it's very, very professional and da da da, but it's not culturally exciting. In my earlier internships were really, really fun because there were people my age, my context, and that was great. I've also worked in more Indian financial spaces, which are very unsystematic in some sense. Anything is happening, no one cares. So that also happens. The rigor is very, very different. Studying in the Indian space, I think, is very, very challenging. The focus is rightly perhaps, but disproportionately on academics. It's very, very stressful. Perhaps that doesn't happen in something like a Delhi University as much as it does in the IITs. Um, but yeah, I think it's a very personal thing as well. But I definitely think that India is more stressful in the work as well as academic space.
Absolutely. So yeah, as you said, personal, it's subjective. Like someone might enjoy that kind of a competitive or that kind of an atmosphere in India. Whereas if you don't
Yeah.
enjoy it, then you can go to some other place where they also equally value other things that you do except your academics?
Surely, and I think competitive is an interesting word, but it could be also demotivatingly competitive, right? You can be competitive in a fun way, which it is in most cases, but there are cases which are just, horrible. Uh, I want to link it to another thing that had happened in one of my internships, which was also the female thing, was we were supposed to present to some people, and I remember doing well in that, and this person had just said that this has happened only because you're a girl. Uh, the implications of all of that. I mean, there was a competitive spirit behind that, but it was just plain wrong, right?
Yeah.
I think those are things that perhaps are not as easy to get away with when you're working for an MNC, or if you're working in a big city, or if you're working outside. It's less likely.
Yes, that makes sense. And that also happens in a lot of, say, they even try to show that in TV shows, and it happens with a lot of people. All like most people that we have on our forum are colored women. So they also say that sometimes they get said that because they're a colored woman, that is why they got so and so opportunity, which is
Yeah,
not true because they are at the same level as the other people. They have those capabilities. It's not just because they were
yeah,
a woman or they were a woman, so as to say that they got it.
it's true. Yeah, it's quite horrible, but it is what it is. So you rise above that.
Absolutely. All right. So I think that was the last question that we had. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank
And it
you.
was an absolute honor having you on our forum and exploring such a different field.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye.